If you're already in New Game Plus 7, you might be struggling to deal some good damage to your targets.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
This happens because as you progress through the New Game Plus cycles, the difficulty of Elden Ring is increased by raising the defensive stats of all the enemies and bosses. This means they have way more HP, huge resistance to status effects, and it's a lot harder to break their stance. However, dealing a lot of damage to the strongest bosses of the game in max scaling is easier than you think. In this video, I'm going to show you 10 amazing builds that will allow you to easily destroy everything in Elden Ring's highest difficulty. Be aware that once you reach New Game Plus 7, the scaling stops there. So if you're in NG Plus 9 or 50, these builds will be the best you can use right now. If you like breaking the game with magic damage, the Night Witch is the perfect build to start with. It's based on getting the most out of the devastating Night Comet sorcery. The main downside of this build was the fact that we didn't have any weapon for melee range, which can result in very uncomfortable fights when closing gaps. To fix that, I optimized the build to get a great performance with the Darkmoon Greatsword, making it a perfect secondary weapon to compensate the flaws of a pure sorcery build. Anyways, your damage with the Night Comet will be so crazy that it doesn't matter if you don't want to use the Darkmoon Greatsword. All you need to do is to find a good position to work around each boss fight and spam the skill like there is no tomorrow. In this case, we are going to use one Staff of Loss on plus 25 and the other one doesn't need to be upgraded. We only need this additional Staff of Loss to stack its passive effect. We are going to be using the Darkmoon Greatsword on plus 10 and the Jellyfish Shield. We need any weapon with the Raptor Optimist Dash of War to easily dodge any difficult attack, and we need any seal we have available to cast our main buffs. We will use these two items with every build, but I will not mention it to avoid being repetitive. I'm going to be rocking the Spellblade set that will increase the damage of the Moonlight Greatsword by a total of 8% if we wear the entire set. This armor set will not increase the damage of the Night Comet at all. If you want to increase the damage of the Night Comet, be sure to use the Rakshasa's armor set that increases our damage by 2% with each piece we wear. The main difference between this one and the Spellblade set is that this one increases our overall damage, while the Spellblade set will limit its power to the magic skills. The best talismans we can use for this build are the Shard of Alexander, the Godfrey Icon, the Magic Scorpion Charm, and the Graven Mask Talisman. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Magic Shrouding Crack tier. And for some reason, this build consumes a lot of stamina, so be sure to craft some Pickled Turtlenecks to boost your stamina regeneration speed. This item is extremely useful because it allows you to play more aggressively, however, it's completely optional. In the same way than with the Seal and the Dagger, I am not going to mention it every time, but feel free to use it if you find it helpful. In order to obtain the max performance of this build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 33 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 20 on Strength, 14 on Dexterity, 80 on Intelligence, and 33 on Faith. Golden Vow, Howl of Shabriri, and Terra Magica are going to be our main buffs. As you can see, I have my Scattering Blessing on the level 20. If you want to deal the max damage possible in the DLC, you need to upgrade it to the level 20 as well. I am going to be using this stat at the level 20 on every single build, so I will not repeat it once again. But be sure to have it at max, otherwise your damage is not gonna be the same as mine. Now I'll show you how to buff your character. This buff routine will be the same for every single character of this list. First we need to use our Flask of Wondrous Physic, then we are going to cast Golden Vow, which is our aura buff. We are going to use a Pickled Turtleneck, which is completely optional indeed, and we are going to cast our body buff depending on the build we are using. As with this build we are dealing physical and magic damage, the best we can use is Howl of Shabriri. If we were dealing only fire and physical damage, we will use Flame Granny Strength, and if we are only dealing physical damage, the best one we can use is Blood Boil Aromatic. But as I previously mentioned, it will change depending on the build. And some additional step we can incorporate to this specific build is cast Terra Magica to increase our magic damage, and once we have used the skill of the Darkmoon Greatsword, we can use the Jellyfish Shield to increase the damage of our attacks. Tell me, my good friends, what will be of this game without a bunk machine that makes the game twice as cool just because the way it works? There is no big science behind a giant strength weapon capable of dealing a lot of damage in just a few hits. The Bloodfiend's arm is a great example of that. With this build you can go wild with the R2s in the same way you will do with any other weapon of this type, but with this one you can also build a ridiculous amount of bleed when you use it on Blood Affinity. In addition, the Bloodfiend's arm features the fastest auto attacks available for a colossal weapon, which also create a Blood Explosion AoE effect that deals extra damage and bleed build up as well. For this one we are going to use the Bloodfiend's arm on plus 25 with the Crackblade Dash of War on the Blood Affinity. We are going to be rocking the Rakshasa's armor set with the White Mask that will increase our damage by 10% with each bleed proc. The most effective talismans we can use for this build are the Lord of Blood's Exultation, the Axe Talisman, the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, and the Dagger Talisman. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Spike Crack tier. With this build we are going to be dealing only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic, but if you don't like crafting, feel free to use Flame Grant Me Strength. With this one I strongly recommend you to use the Pickled Turtlenecks. To get the most out of this weapon we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 14 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 66 on Strength, 25 on Faith and 66 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. If you want to proc bleed faster you can use the Swarm of Flies, it's a very useful incantation with the high level of Arcane we are using. Once again remember to level up your Scattering Blessing to the level 20, this is the last time I mention it. With this one the buff routine will be the same, but instead of Hall of Shabriri we are going to use Blood Boil Aromatic because we are dealing only physical damage, and finally we have to buff our weapon with Crackblade. With that we should be ready to go. In New Game Plus 7 dealing a bunch of damage is a must, but even more important is surviving to the disgusting damage the bosses deal. Therefore a weapon that allows you to perform both actions at the same time, attacking and healing, will be life-changing. The best weapon to fulfill such task is definitely the Blasphemous Blade, an extraordinary unique greatsword that is perfect for everything in max scaling Elden Ring. When you use the Ash of War you deal a stupid amount of damage while recovering a great percentage of your total HP, making you very hard to defeat. And if that was not enough, when exploring you will also recover your HP with each enemy you defeat, regardless if you do it with the skill or just with a simple swing of the weapon. Isn't that phenomenal? Now we are going to use the Blasphemous Blade on +10 with the entire Rakshasa's armor set. The best talismans we can use with this one are the Talisman of the Dread, the Shard of Alexander, the Fire Scorpion Charm and the All Lord's Talisman. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique we will be rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Flame Shrouding Crack tier. To dramatically increase the power of our next fire damage instance we are going to use the Oil Pot and the Hefty Oil Pot. The big one will increase our fire damage by 70% and this one will do it by 50%. The most optimal stats for this build are 50 on Vigor, 30 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 22 on Strength, 21 on Dexterity and 99 on Faith. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. If you want you can use Blessing of the Erdtree to counter the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, but I can tell you that with the Blasphemous Blade that is not gonna be a problem. The buff routine with this one will remain the same. Speaking about healing and attacking, you won't believe how reliable and powerful can the Great Katana with Blood Tax be if you use it properly. Normally I will tell you to just use this combo with Bleed Affinity, because it will display a higher bleed build-up than with any other affinity. Nonetheless, in this case it's important to address something called motion value. This number is basically how much damage your weapon will deal per each attack without considering the target's defense. This value also affects the status effects build-up, which means that if we have 100 bleed and the motion value of the attack is 50, we will be dealing only the half of our total bleed build-up. In this case, the motion value for the bleed build-up when performing blood tags is 100, 50, 50 and 100. Basically, we are losing a 25% of our total bleed build-up. Therefore, in order to counter this, we will use Blood Flame Blade. This incantation bleed build-up will not be affected by motion value and we will stack it with the passive bleed of the Great Katana. In this case, we are going to use the Great Katana on +25 with the Blood Tax Ash of War on the Quality Affinity, and we will combine it with the Ansbach set that will increase the damage of Blood Tax by 15%. If you want, you can also use the White Mask with this one, but I don't find it worth it as the damage increase will be only of 1%. The most effective talismans for this build are the Lord of Blood's Exultation, the Shard of Alexander, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our Flask of Wondrous Physique, the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier will grant us the best results. With this one, we are going to be using Blood Boil Aromatic because it's the best body buff when you are dealing only physical damage. If you don't want to craft this item, feel free to use Flame Grant Me Strength. I strongly recommend you to craft enough Pickled Turtlenecks because with this one is better if you play very aggressive. To get the most out of our Great Katana, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 20 on Mind, 37 on Endurance, 65 on Strength and Dexterity, and 25 on Faith. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. And to proc bleed as much times as is possible, we are going to use Blood Flame Blade. The buff routine with this one will be the same, but at the end we are going to use Blood Flame Blade. If you are still wondering why the Fire Knight's Greatsword is the best colossal sword of the game, let me break it down for you real quick. This weapon has the R1 moveset of the Godslayer's Greatsword combined with the piercing R2 attacks of the Zweihander. It has a great base damage and outstanding scale values, shining the most with Flame Art and Sacred Affinity, preserving its innate fire damage regardless of which one you choose. You can infuse it with your favorite Ashes of War, Flame Spear being the most stylish one, but Royal Knights resolves the best to obliterate the toughest bosses you can imagine. The fact that you can stack all these features together allow you to dominate the PvE scene without even flinching. If you want to deal more damage with any of these builds, feel free to incorporate the Madness buffs. In this case I didn't do it to make it easier for you to use, but if you have enough experience, go ahead and use them. In this case we are going to use the Fire Knight's Greatsword on +25 with the Royal Knight's Resolve Ash of War on the Flame Art or Sacred Affinity, depending on the enemies we are going to face. In the same way we can use the Black Steel Twin Blade on +25 with the same Ash of War War on the Sacred or Flame Bard affinity, depending on the enemies as well. As you can see, the best armor set we can use to increase our damage is the Rakshasa set, but if you are tired of using this armor set, feel free to use any other one. The only reason I use it is to deal additional damage. The most effective talismans we can use for this build are the Axe Talisman, the Two-Handed Sword Talisman, the Shard of Alexander, and the Fire Scorpion Charm. Okay guys, just to let you know that the talisman that you have to use here is the Spear Talisman, not the Shard of Alexander. That was a mistake for me and I apologize. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we will get the best results with the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Flame Shrouding Crack tier. If we are going to be dealing holy damage, we will have to replace the Fire Scorpion Charm with the Sacred Scorpion Charm and the Flame Shrouding Crack tier with the Holy Shrouding Crack tier. But that will depend on the fights we are going to take. To increase our fire damage by a lot, we can use the Oil Pots. In order to obtain the max performance of this build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 20 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 27 on Strength, 26 on Dexterity, and 99 on Faith. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. If you want, you can use the Blessing of the Erdtree to counter the HP drain effect of the Blood-Sucking Crack tier. The buff routine with this one will be the same, but before hitting our target, we have to use Royal Knight's Resolve, and we have to attack our target fast cause this thing only lasts 10 seconds. Now we have the Moraes Executioner Sword. This is in my opinion one of the most fascinating yet powerful weapons of the entire game. It's probably the easiest one to build of this list. You don't need to think too much about it. It's a unique greatsword that scales with Strength and Arcane, pretty rare compared to the classic Strength and Faith or Dexterity Arcane builds. It also deals magic damage, and most players get so confused because of this. It doesn't scale with intelligence at all, it's just a weapon with very unique features. The most important and most powerful being Eochaid's Dancing Blade, the closest thing to having a machine gun in Elden Ring. It feels more like a burst of bullets rather than a spinning weapon. Its damage is absurd. For this one, we will use the Moraes Executioner Sword on +10, and we will combine it with the Dancer's Armor set. That will increase the damage of Eochaid's Dancing Blade by a total of 10% if we wear the entire set. The best talismans we can use for this build are the Shard of Alexander, the Godfrey Icon, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we are rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier. This way we will deal the max damage possible. To get the most out of this weapon, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 20 on Mind, 35 on Endurance, 80 on Strength, 14 on Dexterity, 33 on Faith, and 40 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. Whenever I speak about the Sword of Night and Flame, I explain it is a weapon that allows you to enjoy magic and fire simultaneously, but at the same time I cannot avoid to feel strange cause I really prefer taking one damage type and taking it to the limits. To be honest, the magic stream attack is fantastic, but the fire wave is just a thing out of this planet. The attack itself is majestic, it has a huge range, it looks really cool and covers a wide area, being incredibly useful to delete a lot of enemies or to simply burn the boss's HP bars to cinders. Also, the Relana's cameo buff dramatically increased the performance of the Sword of Night and Flame's unique skill, bringing it back to the meta category. Now we are going to use the Sword of Night and Flame on +10 with the entire Rakshas's armor set. The best talismans we can use with this setup specifically, that is based on dealing fire damage only, are the Shard of Alexander, the Relana's cameo, the Fire Scorpion Charm, and the All Lord's Talisman. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Flame Shrouding Crack tier. To increase our fire damage to the limit, we are going to use the Oil Pot or the Hefty Oil Pots. I recommend you to use the Hefty one, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to use than the regular version. The most optimal stats for this one are 60 on Vigor, 27 on Mind, 35 on Endurance, 12 on Strength and Dexterity, 24 on Intelligence to be able to use the weapon, and 99 on Faith to deal the max damage possible. Golden Vow and Hall of Shabriri are going to be our main buffs. With the fire builds, everything will be the same, but before attacking your target with the weapon, be sure to hit it with an oil pot. This way your fire damage will grow dramatically. Now we are getting into the dirt, into the mud. We are touching the grounds of the filthy casuals like myself who doesn't care about how stupid our character looks jumping with two giant weapons like a freaking grasshopper. What matters here is dealing a lot of damage, and that is exactly what you can do with this setup. I'm running the Rusted Anchors to address the majority of the boss fights, cause most of them are weak to pierce damage, or at least they are not resistant to it. Compared to slash or strike damage, pierce is really useful in like 90% of the game. However, you need to be prepared to face those enemies that are actually weak to strike damage. I'm nothing better for that duty than the Great Club. Just send it like a maniac to the final boss and look, he's out, he didn't last 10 seconds bro. What I love the most of this build is that you don't depend on the status effects, and you can experiment with other strength weapons you like, and whenever you are struggling you just show up with this wild setup baby. For this one we are going to use 2 Rusted Anchors on +25 with the Crackblade Ash of War on the Heavy Affinity, or 2 Large Clubs on +25 with the Crackblade Ash of War on the Heavy Affinity as well. We are going to use 3 pieces of the Rakshas's armor set and the Greybird's Black Wheel armor to increase the jump attacks by 10%. The best talismans we can use for this one are the Viridian Amber Orb Medallion on +3, the Claw Talisman, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. The Claw Talisman and the Greybird's Blackwell Armor will stack together, increasing the damage of our jump attacks by a total of 26%. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we are going to be running the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier. With this build, we are going to be dealing only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic. But if you don't like crafting, feel free to use Flame Grant Me Strength, it's pretty effective too. To get the max performance of our weapons, we are going to use 60 on Vigor, 18 on Mind, 50 on Endurance, 99 on Strength, and 25 on Faith. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. In this case, the buff routine will be the same, but we have to buff our both weapons with Crackblade before starting the fight. With that, we should be ready to go, and we will be dealing a lot of damage, bruh. When it comes to DPS, the dual spears are extremely overpowered. There are two main reasons for this. Their power stance moveset is really fast and they deal pure piercing damage, so nothing will be able to absorb their damage effectively. And this power stance moveset only features 3 attacks, which allows you to effectively use the Twin Blade Talisman, one of the most broken talismans of the game and one of the worst at the same time. This guy increases the power of the last hit of a sequence of attacks by 45%. In most cases, this is basically trash. Because of the short attack chain of the spears moveset, we can constantly deal a crazy amount of damage while building up bleed at the same time with this combo. The first time I tried this build, I was flabbergasted. For this one, we are going to use 2 Cross Naginatas on +25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Occult Affinity. Some of you guys might be wondering why I'm not using the Bloodfiend's Fork when this one has a better scaling on Arcane. If you pay attention, the base damage of the Naginata is slightly better than the base damage of the Bloodfiend's Fork. That's why even if this one has a better scaling, we will get the best damage with the Cross Naginata. This doesn't mean this one is bad, it's just that the Naginata is slightly better. But you can also break the game with the Bloodfiend's Fork. So if you don't have another Naginata, you can perfectly pair it with the Bloodfiend's Fork. We are rocking 3 pieces of the Rakshasa set and the White Mask. The best talismans we can use for this build are the Twin Blade Talisman, the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, we are rocking the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier. Once again, this weapon deals only physical damage, that's why our best body buff is going to be Blood Boil Aromatic. And with these dual wielding builds, I strongly recommend you to use the Pickled Turtlenecks. This way you will be able to attack constantly without losing your stamina. To get the most out of our weapons, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 15 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 18 on Strength, 34 on Dexterity, 25 on Faith, and 90 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. In this case, the buff routine will be basically the same: Physic, Golden Vow, and your body buff. After that, you just have to buff your both weapons with Seppuku, and you should be ready to go. Finally, as the winner of this top, we have the Bleed Jump Attack builds, specifically the Gargoyle's Twin Blades and the Beastman's Curved Swords. Why not only the Gargoyle's Twin Blades? As I previously mentioned, there are weapons that can cover up to the 90% of the game enemies. However, the Gargoyle's Twin Blades will never beat the Curved Swords when facing enemies that are weak to slash damage, such as Midra, Morgoth, the Golden Hippo, or Mesmer. It's for that reason that I also included the Beastman's Curved Swords, cause both weapons share the same scale values. With the same stats, we can get the most out of the Gargoyle's Twin Blades to dominate the game in general, and the Beastman's Curved Swords to address those specific fights where the Twin Blades struggle a little bit. This is the ultimate build to conquer Elden Ring in max scaling New Game Plus. And for this final build, we are going to use 2 Gargoyle's Twin Blades on +25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Blood Affinity. And this one is completely optional, but if you want to be prepared for every scenario, we can use the Beastman's Curved Swords on +25 with the Seppuku Ash of War on the Blood Affinity as well. If you want to deal some extra damage, you can also use the Shriek of Sorrow Ash of War. But to get the most out of that Ash of War, you need to do some further steps on the buff routine, and the difference in my opinion is not worth it. Now we are rocking 2 pieces of the Rakshasa set with the Greybird's Blackwell Armor and the White Mask. The most effective talismans we can use for this build are the Lord of Blood's Exaltation, the Claw Talisman, the Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Roaring Windsor Insignia. In our Flask of Wondrous Physic, once again we are going to use the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Thorny Crack tier. And the best body buff with this one will be Blood Boil Aromatic, cause we are dealing only physical damage. Feel free to use Flame Grant Me Strength if you don't like crafting. In order to obtain the max performance of this build, we are going to use 50 on Vigor, 17 on Mind, 40 on Endurance, 80 on Strength, 25 on Faith, and 50 on Arcane. Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength are going to be our main buffs. And last, do not forget to upgrade your Scadutree Blessing to the level 20. Plenty of you guys ask me why I'm dealing so much damage in the DLC, and most of you guys do not have your Scadutree Blessing upgraded. That's why your damage is completely different. Now the only thing left to do is, after the buff routine, just upgrade your weapon with Seppuku and you should be ready to go. Let me know in the comment section, what do you think of these builds? Do you think there is any other build that can make New Game Plus 7 to look like a joke? Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel. Have a great day guys, my name's Carlos and I'll see you in the next one.